Starting here soon, and we would love to know where you're from. So if you wouldn't mind changing your name by adding the program that you're from after your name, we greatly appreciate that too. Thanks again, and we'll turn it over to Kathleen and start recording.
All right, thank you, Cherise, and hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm happy to be with you today, and I'm just going to size my screen. We do have an interactive webinar planned for you this afternoon, so we'll be asking you some questions, and at any time, we're a small but mighty group right now. It looks like we're about 19 of us. So if you have questions at any time or you want to chime in, you're welcome to unmute and chime in. So I'm just going to kind of take it away here. First of all, in the chat, if you wouldn't mind just putting your name, your role, your organization, and then one change your organization is facing or one change that you have recently faced. So if you want to just put that in the chat, just to kind of ground us in this turbulent, turmoil, turnover world that we find ourselves in right now. I give everybody a few seconds to think about that and post in the chat. Okay, so Diana is good to see you, Diana. I know today was going to be a day off for you, so you're being very dedicated. Let's see. So one change is helping agencies recover and return to pre-pandemic levels. Yes, and Lori is talking about a change in a student information system. Dana just had 2 teachers resign. So those are folks that were teaching 3 classes and working on filling those positions and keeping students engaged as we go through the hiring process. Absolutely. And Shannon, thank you. You're definitely experiencing change in leadership, going through turmoil. I mean, growing pains. Absolutely. And Angela, this is a new school for you. So you're the person who's new in an organization. Yes. And so Kristen talks about a new principal. Lena, you also have a new principal. And Uta has new program directors, a new VP at the colleges. Yes. And let's see, so Michelle talks about losing CTE teachers to community college, but now using partners to bring back CTE programs. And Benna is talking about changes with curriculum PD and leadership roles changes, yes. And is it Tamar? Tamar is talking about just employee changes. So all of these things are not uncommon. That's what we're facing right now. It's that the world is quite different. And I see Laura also has instructors leaving for other opportunities. So we're going to have a chance to talk about all these different kinds of changes and examine some of those things. So you can see that today we have 3 primary objectives that we wanted to address. We're going to explore the kinds of changes that we're facing. We're going to spend some time discussing strategies that we can use to create this consistency, cohesion, and a shared vision among our stakeholders. And then we'll give you an opportunity to think about how you might want to take this work forward. So what have we talked about today and how can you apply that moving forward? So we've got a join up activity. We'll be talking a little bit about establishing culture and why organizational culture is important. We'll talk about onboarding with intention, impacts for hiring, and what can you do if you're the one who is new? And then we'll have some next steps and closing. So all of that is in our next 50 minutes together. So first of all, we have a poll for you. If you want to take a minute and just identify what areas you're currently experiencing some change. And this is multiple choice, so you can choose more than one answer. I think we set it up that way. So if you want to say all of the above, you could. So I see that almost everybody has had a chance to respond at this point. So let me share these results with you all. So you can see that the majority of us are experiencing turnover in your organizations. We might have new leadership at our central office, new leadership in partners organizations, and 4 of us are new to our own roles. So that's quite a bit of change. So let's take a look at what we have moving ahead. So why do we want to focus on this idea of turnover, turbulence, and turmoil? Easy for me to say. And as we think about what's going on in our community, so we know we just had this pandemic and we're still feeling effects of this global pandemic. We have inflation that's going on. So there was an article last spring that came out, it was actually published in Fast Company, and it was a research article about what's going on. They were calling these things, these trends in workforce, the 5 R's. And so the first one was the Great Resignation. And so by that, we're talking about churn. And so one of the things that we're seeing is that people are leaving jobs at great rates, and maybe they're looking for different things, but we're seeing this churn in the labor force. We're seeing the great retirement. So we have baby boomers who are moving into retirement, and some people may have moved into retirement a little earlier than they wanted to, just because they had this opportunity to kind of see what it was like during the pandemic. So we're having retirement at higher numbers than we've ever seen. We have something that's called the Great Reshuffle. And this is increased numbers of people who have changed not only jobs, but who have changed entire careers. So just said, this is an opportunity for me to reinvent myself and do something that I really love. Life is short. I'm going to change it up. Then we have the Great Refusal. And so that's the 4th R here. The Great Refusal is really about people turning down minimum wage jobs. So until 1968, minimum wage really kept pace with inflation. And starting in 1968, it really did not. So minimum wage, we all know, you can't support yourself. You can't support your family with a minimum wage job. And so we're seeing people flee from those jobs. And right now, if on a national level, inflation and minimum wage had kept pace, the minimum wage would be over $21 per hour. And of course, in California, the cost of living is much higher. And so we would be looking at a much higher minimum wage. And then the 5th R that they talk about in this article is the Great Relocation. And collectively, these 5 shifts we might hear referred to as the Great Rethink, or some people are calling it the Great Reset. But this is really more of an empowered workforce where people want more autonomy and flexibility. People are no longer centered on where we work, but rather how work fits into our lives. And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, there's no putting the genie back in the bottle on this. Now that people have had this opportunity to work from home, to maybe move to Colorado because I always wanted to live in the mountains and be able to hike every morning. People are taking advantage of those things. And so we're seeing these new habits created around this. This work is actually from Gallup's workforce studies, and what Gallup's research has shown is that there's really kind of a disconnect between what employees say they value in workplace and what our managers believe employees value. So if you take a look at these 10 things, what employees say they value most: full appreciation for the work that they've done, and feeling in on things, feeling involved in these decisions. And you can see that good wages comes fifth in this, in looking at this chart. When managers talk about what they think employees want, they think good wages is number one, the first thing on the list. And you can see that the two things that are most important, full appreciation for work done and feeling in on decision making, are low on this scale of what managers think employees want. So when we kind of take a look at some of that research and we think about what is the bigger implication for this, I think what we're thinking about is, how are we creating these engagement strategies for employees to be involved and valued in the workplace? You may have heard this little slogan that retention is the new recruitment. So if you can retain people in your workforce, obviously you're not having to invest a lot of time in recruiting. And so when we think about this whole notion of engagement strategies for employees, one of the things we're really talking about and focusing on is establishing a workplace culture. What is the culture of your organization? And so we're going to spend a little time going into that organizational culture and thinking about that. So when we think about what is organizational culture, it's really this set of values and beliefs, attitudes, systems, and rules that outline and influence employee behavior within an organization. So some people would say that it's the glue that holds an organization together, or it's kind of the silent code of conduct. It's more about how things get done than what actually gets done. So it's, how does this organization work? There's a quote from an article that came out from the Human Resources Management Society, and they talk about culture is not a thing. It's not something that an organization either has or doesn't have. Culture is something an organization is. Your organization could be assessed today, and you would be able to define your culture in specific terms and even identify subcultures. So it's kind of like knowing, this is how we do things here. This is what we stand for here. So I just want to let you think about that a little bit as organizational culture and thinking about what your culture is. We're going to dive a little deeper into this. So we know that culture actually wins talent. Strong cultures create people who are brand ambassadors. Employees with a strong connection to an organization's culture will show higher levels of engagement. Engaged employees are more likely to refer friends to their organizations. And we know that talented people want to work for organizations with strong cultures. We also know that we can apply this same concept to our partners. If you're an organization that has a lot of energy, that has a positive direction, where people like to spend time and work, they're seeing results, they're feeling appreciated. It's also easier for us to attract partners to that kind of an organization. Talented people want to be affiliated with organizations with strong culture. And then there's some other little analyses that we see. Strong cultures, you'll have 41% less absenteeism in an organization with a strong culture, 70% fewer safety accidents, 59% less turnover, 10% higher customer satisfaction, 17% higher productivity, and 21% higher profitability in these organizations that Gallup has identified with strong work cultures. So in essence, you probably heard this Drucker saying before, that culture really eats strategy for breakfast. So let's think about our organizational culture. And I'm going to ask you to think a little bit about what evidence do you have of what your organizational culture is? What artifacts or what evidence do you have? You can unmute or type in the chat. Shannon, your consortium newsletter. Yes, perfect. Where you can highlight positive stories. You can tell the world what's happening, talk about outcomes, talk about events. Great. Diana, the way people communicate, email, call, Teams. Yes. So do you have an open door policy? Do people have to schedule appointments to come and see you? All of those things start to really help define a culture. Ucha talks about your physical space. Yes. And Angela, your physical appearance and the organization of the school. Laura talks about the mission, weekly updates, open door policy. Yeah. So all of those things. Oh, thank you, Dana. Yeah, student and teacher feedback. What do they say about our programs? What do they say about the work environment? So all of those things become the evidence that we have of what our organizational culture really is. So I came up with this list, many of the things that you talked about. Oh, Erin, thank you. Yes, your WASC review. So your self-study report should start to get at your culture. Absolutely. So mission, vision, value statements, memoranda of understanding. So these are maybe artifacts that you have that kind of talk about what your relationships are with other entities, your community partners, or you could have internal MOUs with other departments in your organization. Your governance documents might talk about your beliefs, some of your, how you work together. What does it mean to be an effective member in a consortium, for example? And some organizations may have norms or collective commitments that staff have developed. This is how we work together. When we have our PLCs, this is what we're looking for. So it could be a meeting norm, anything like that starts to really provide us with some evidence of our culture. So I want to shift now to thinking about culture and thinking about those pieces of evidence that you have. And now let's apply this to intentional onboarding. So when you have a new employee come into the organization, how does that new employee really learn about the culture of the organization? And so I'll give you some examples of things that we have been doing. We created a list of essential learnings, and some of you may have heard me talk about this before, but it's really an outline to onboard a new staff member. And so we have them over a 2-week period meet with different people in our organization and they schedule time to sit down and start to create their network. So they're meeting with different people, and it's basically their orientation over a 2-week period with different people assigned to talk to them about specific things. And so we call this essential learnings. We liked that process so well that we also created the same process in our consortium. So we said, if you're a new leader of an organization joining our consortium, we have an essential learnings process for you. Well, you'll sit down with different ones of our consortium, our member district leaders, and you'll learn about different aspects of the consortium. And I have both of those essential learning documents that you can take a look at. I think Laura's going to put those in the chat for us. And while she does that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the community partners. So I think some of you talked about having turnover with community partners. And so when our community partners have new members or new leaders coming in, how do we acquaint them with what our culture is, or what our relationship has been in the past? So the exercise in thinking about the artifacts, I think, is important in this, because you can schedule a meeting with your new community partner, introduce them, introduce yourself, introduce your programs. But when you're doing that, you're also introducing yourself and introducing them to this long history of partnership that you've had with them. And so bringing those artifacts along with you. Oh, we've been working together for the last 10 years. Some of our joint projects are X, Y, and Z. We've had a memorandum of understanding in place between our organizations for the last 5 years. These are the kinds of projects that we've worked on together. These are the results. This is what we hope about working on in the future. So it's scheduling a meeting, it's talking to them about the culture. How have you worked together? And I think it's providing them with those artifacts that we thought about. So using that same approach, you can also work with your district leaders in this way. So when you have a new district leader and they're trying to get to know you or your school or your programs, I do the exact same thing. I schedule meetings with new people and I talk to them about all the ways that they would interact with my department and how we've worked together in the past. If we do have MOUs that we have with different parts of our organization, I would bring those MOUs to the table and talk to them about that. If in my case, I have a new associate superintendent of learning support services this year, so she's my new boss. So when I sat down with her, I showed her the board items that we had over the last year. So she would know the kinds of things that come from my department that need board approval. I told her about how I like to work. You know, I schedule a meeting with her monthly. I try to not bother her in between my monthly meetings, but if I do bother her, it's because something's going to be relevant. I like to have no surprises. I want to be sure that she hears about things about me or my department from me. And so, you know, just kind of acquainting her with that whole process. So I'm going to stop there and ask you, do you have any examples of onboarding with intention? So anything that you might have done with new staff members, new community partners, new consortia leaders, or new district leaders, ways that you've introduced them to your culture and really helped to onboard them with intention. You can unmute and chime in if you don't want to type.
Maybe I can chime in. At least for our transition services, every once in a while we have a new counselor support services specialist, and we have sort of a roadmap, 2 weeks of observing, shadowing people. So we have the new person shadowing 2 staff members each day. And then before observation and after, there's a prep session, what to look for when meeting with the staff, and then a debrief afterward. What have you seen? What have you learned? What are the materials you would like to have now that you have met that person? And after those 2 weeks, the person then meets with their supervisor and they do a final debrief, and then they swim.
That's awesome. Thank you, Uta. Great. And Dana, I saw that you came off camera. Did you have an example you wanted to share?
I was just going to share more at the administrative level. Our consortia director, whenever somebody onboards, always does a one-on-one meeting. Brings alongside. Often we'll introduce them to other members, and Angela could probably speak to that more intently because she is the one who most recently went through that process in our consortia.
How did
Yes.
that go, Angela?
It was very, it helped focus me on, who the partners are, who's close to me, and it gave me a quick and immediate connection with other people in my position who are close by. So I had mentors and I had people I could ask questions of. So it was very helpful.
Great. Excellent. And Diana, were you going to say something too?
Well, ironically, I think the same day I hit Angela up and went through some of the most recent reports, right? You had a busy onboarding day that day, if I remember correctly. But we just want to make sure that we get everyone started on the right foot. And so what I did as I switched into my new role with CDE is I looked at some of the historical documents that are required for WIOA. I looked at some of the annual plans and 3-year plans for the consortia that I'd be working with. And then I try to attend physically several meetings a year in their region. I work with Riverside and San Bernardino, so that if there is something that maybe, we want to discuss, a little more personal, not necessarily having an email thread or whatever, I'm there so that they know that CDE is there to support them and help them through. And Kathleen, I've been an adult ed practitioner for a very long time, so I feel like I have a different view than some of my CDE colleagues.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Diana. And Dana, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, so along those lines, regionally, San Bernardino and Riverside counties meet regularly. And so that's another opportunity for someone who's new to onboard, at least administratively, or if you're running the programs. It's not at the teacher level. I actually like some of the other ideas I'm hearing and aspects, but if you're a leader at your organization and you're needing to know who to connect with, because many of us, we're the only adult school in our district, so we need to connect outside of our district when those questions arise, or you need someone to bounce ideas off of.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it can be isolating, right? To be in adult education. In most districts, there's only one person in adult education. And so it's really knowing our colleagues that help us build our network. So Shannon says she has a Zoom call with the consortium director and the data accountability manager and curriculum coordinator. And from there, we invite new people to the consortium board meetings. Kristen talks about sharing resumes and backgrounds amongst new staff. So when a new person comes on, that you kind of share their information. Laura has an orientation program and observation with staff. Angela talks about AJCC, Community Services Coordinator, made an appointment with me and walked you through the AJCC MOU. That's excellent. Yes, that's what I like to do with new partners when there's turnover, is go and just show them this. And I'm your friend, you can call me, that sort of thing. Michelle talks about meetings, job shadowing, and MOUs as well. And then Kristen talks about learning all your colleagues' professional goals for this school year. Yeah, and Kristen, maybe you could say a little more about that. Why is it important to know what their goals are? Or one of us could help you maybe. Oh, there she is.
There. We have a brand new head principal this year, and none of us really knew a lot about her background. So for me, when she first came on board, I requested that I would have a meeting with her so that I would learn more about her background and how she would lead our campus and what her philosophies were. And then I wanted to do the same so that she knew what I was bringing to the table. And then she set up an individual brief appointment with all of the staff, part-time and full-time. And what I do with my team of teachers is I ask them what their professional goals are for each term, and then I follow up on subsequent meetings to see if it's changed or it's updated based on where we're at in the term and what the needs are of our students at that time, because of course they're evolving and they're changing. And so in order to stay abreast with that, then you need to sometimes change your goals.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Kristen. And I
Sure.
think really, just like our students, when we think about persistence, learner persistence, and knowing student goals, the students are more likely to persist when we can make the instruction relevant to them. The same is true of our partners. So if we know what people's goals are, whether they're professional goals or whether they're personal goals for people, we can look at how we can support those goals, how we can leverage efforts and work together to make things happen. So I think that's really critical. Thank you for that, Kristen. So let's think a little bit about the hiring process and how do we, through the interview process, really find people that are going to be inspired by and want to be a part of our organizational culture. So I think one example that I know of is that you can give your mission and your vision and your value statement to people before the interview process. And then you can ask a question during the interview about the person's philosophy of education. It's just that simple. What is your philosophy of education? And so if you hear somebody kind of hearken back to, wow, I read your value statements and this is where I want to work, or if it somehow comes up in that interview process, you'll find that there's a match there. Gallup's research also shows that when job candidates ask questions about the organizational mission and the purpose, it's a strong indicator of high talent. So people that are maybe lower talent, might focus on my work hours, where am I going to work, what's my pay going to be like, how many vacation days. They're asking these questions that are more self-centered. If you find somebody that's really looking for the match, you're finding somebody that is more likely to be a high talent person. So thinking about that, I'm wondering if any of you have examples of your interview process and how you may ask questions or conduct interviews in a way that reflects organizational culture or measures this organizational match. Any examples? Do any of you provide the mission and vision and value statements to candidates? Do you expect them to have done their homework and looked it up themselves? Dana, I see your hand up.
Yeah, we don't necessarily review the missions precisely, but we give them the elevator version, our goal is to help students get a job, get a better job, or get to college. That's included in the interview process.
Great, great, thank you. Anybody else? How are you finding these matches for your organization in the interview process?
The challenge we're having lately is we want the match, but sometimes we have open positions and the choice is one or nothing. And we've taken nothing over one sometimes because it's not a good match.
Right.
But I know others are having similar challenges of some of our colleagues. I know they were looking for ESL teachers early in the year, and there are more positions than there are teachers.
Right, yeah. And so you wonder then, is because who's working with you and what their beliefs are so much a part of the culture. If you compromise on who you're bringing in and they're not reflecting that culture, all of a sudden you might see your culture eroding or changing. And so really good point. Thank you, Dana. And Shannon put in the chat, this is actually really hard because as the consortium director, I don't hire anyone. Each side is responsible for hiring new staff for their adult education program. And sometimes they don't know a whole lot. This is why, as a consortium director, I meet with them to share our consortium goals and culture. Yeah, and Shannon, I don't know. I mean, in our consortium, we'll invite other member districts to sit in on interviews. So that might be something that you could look at too. Maybe even sharing what questions people are asking when they're recruiting or how people are recruiting together. So you're leveraging resources might be something to think about. And Tamar says, we let individuals know what our mission is during the interview and ask them questions that relate to your core values. Yeah, that's really good, Tamar. I love that. Thank you. Okay.
Can I
Elsa.
say, yeah, so most of us that work in a district or we're part of the district, they're pretty much the ones that go through that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have a say. I did have a say into what kind of questions to ask. I did change the questions a little bit, but they're the ones that provide the panel for interview. They're the ones that screen out the candidates. And so sometimes they may have a TESOL, let's say, right? But they're not credentialed. If they don't have a K through 12 or adult ed credential, they get screened out. And sometimes they don't even make it to the interview. So that's something that I think as I get my feet more into this adult ed, because this is only my second full year as principal. I think that's something that I can work with my district to say, no, this person is qualified to teach at the adult school, may not be qualified to teach at K through 12, but they are qualified for the adult school. And that's where I think I'm running into not being able to get not the right people, but I'm missing the morning teachers, right? Because some of them are not looking for a full-time job. They just want the 4 hours in the morning. But the district, at times, it's just like, they don't have the right credential. I'm like, but they're qualified to teach adult school. But they won't allow them to go through, so.
Well, and I think part of that is probably just working on that relationship with your human resources or personnel department so that they understand the nuances of what other credentials could somebody have and teach in your program. What about an adult education credential? How could they get that? Because sometimes people have the experience that they could apply for an adult ed credential, but they may not have the teaching credential when they come to you. So you could make an offer and they could get that adult ed designated subjects credential so they could teach for you. But it's really making sure that you are working in sync with your HR department, right? So thank you, Elsa.
And it's a process, because last year I started, can I change the questions? They were like, no. And I was like, but these questions don't really relate to adult school, right? It's a little different. And so this year, they did allow me to they said, send me the questions that you have and we'll work with them. So I sent them the questions, they reworded them or, made it their own, but kind of using my language. So it was a half and half there. So I was kind of happy with that.
Yeah, and sometimes solutions aren't going to be here tomorrow. There's sometimes solutions, you just have to chip away at them. I'm always focused on the long game, especially when you're working with partners or other district departments. You just can kind of sow the seeds and keep watering them, and slowly but surely you'll start to move things along. And Uta, you've talked about if the position provides consortium-wide services, so a support position that's going to interact with all the consortium members, you interview together, great. And then Diana, I think was a comment for Elsa related to having transcripts reviewed to see if a teacher could qualify for that designated subjects adult education credential. And Dana submitted questions to HR and was allowed to use them. Yes. And then you're right. Once you ask the first candidate a question, you're required to ask all candidates the same questions. So I'm going to push us forward a little bit. And now we're going to think about what happens when you're the newbie. So when you're the new person, how is it that you put yourself in the way of information so that you can learn about the culture of an organization and you can contribute to that culture? So, AXA's advice is if you're a new administrator, the first year, your job is to listen and learn. So you're asking questions, you're not changing things, you're listening and learning. Now, not everybody has the luxury, because sometimes you come into a new position and there are some things that you have to do. You might have to clean up some things. But if you have that opportunity to listen and learn to the extent possible, that's what the AXA advice is. I will tell you about an example of an assistant principal that I worked with here. And her name was Teresa Paulskill. And when she came to my department, she put herself in the way of information like nobody I've ever seen. One of the things she asked me on the first day is, do you think that all the requisitions that this department processes could come across my desk? Like, could I just have copies of them, or could I just see things? And just by seeing what we were spending our money on, what were our purchases, she started to understand who was doing what software we were using, what textbooks we were using. She understood so many things just by that simple thing of saying, hey, I want to see requisitions. I want to see the timesheets that we're processing. Who are we paying to do what? And so putting yourself in the way of information so that you can really have this plan to learn what you don't know. We've all heard people say, I don't know what I don't know, but there's a way that you can be kind of strategic about learning these things that you don't know. So let's move ahead, and I want to talk a little bit about this delicate balance, because once we get really mired in organizational culture, we don't want to take it to the extreme that we're one of those people that says, we've always done it this way, and so we don't want to change. Our culture is this. We want to have a positive culture. We want our culture to be responsive, and responsive means that we are going to change the culture. So Liz Wiseman wrote this book a few years ago, Rookie Smarts. And so Rookie Smarts, she talks about the mindset of a rookie. And so if you're a veteran employee, you want to make sure that you're still kind of a rookie at heart. And so some of the things she talks about, the rookie rules, are trying to get fired. Now, what do you think she means by that? She doesn't mean actually trying to get fired, but she means thinking creatively, like asking the questions about why are we doing things? Throw away your notes so that you're not always relying on what we used to do. Surf with the amateurs, she talks about. Shifting from leader to learner. So just as we talked about when you're a newbie, that you're asking a lot of questions, or we could take that Ted Lasso lesson of being curious, not judgmental, because you really want to ask, you want to know, you want to be a learner. Step into your discomfort zone, take small steps, create rituals for renewal. So what do we mean by that? How do we take a step back from our tasks and the work and the things that we know and really have kind of this high level overview where we have a chance to kind of think about how we're doing things and doing things differently. Rethink how you manage talent. So again, if we know that what people really value is being valued for the job that they're doing and to be in on decisions, how can you do that? How can you manage your talent in a way that people are getting concrete, positive feedback about the work that they're doing so they see the value that they're providing? Give your rookies a voice. So when new people are at the table, asking them what they see. Oh, you're new to this organization. What did you learn in the first 2 weeks of being here? Or you might see it differently. What did you do at your organization? So you're actually like eliciting the viewpoints of these new people, and let your executives or your leaders be rookies again. So just thinking about how does your culture maybe allow for this rookie mindset. So I'm looking at the clock and we've got about 7 minutes left. So I want us to think about our next steps. And so I'm going to give you a few minutes just to think about one thing that resonates with you that we've talked about today, something that you might want to learn more about. And one thing that you think you can implement in the next 30 days, so between now and November 30th, is there one thing that you want to maybe put on your calendar to say, I could bring this forward, I can bring this work forward? I'm going to be quiet and give you a few minutes to think about this. Angela, thanks for being a brave person and posting first. Definitely wanting to work on creating a responsive culture and tune into the values of staff. Thank you. Oh, and Diana says she likes the idea of being in the way as a method to learn outside the box. Yes, I love that, Diana. Thank you. And Shannon, all of this resonates with me. Oh, I'm glad, Shannon. I'd like to learn more about how to work with each site to make sure they know what our consortium goals are before they make the hiring decisions. I'm going to work on our onboarding process and do more check-ins instead of holding our onboarding meeting and then hoping the district takes care of the new hire. Yeah, I think that's really valuable, Shannon. I love that. And then Uta is talking about onboarding matters, yes, and deserves time. Check in with staff on values, be a rookie every once in a while. Yes, yeah, it's hard not to be that person that says, well, we've done this before. But it's really important sometimes to just be curious, just allow yourselves to be curious. And Dana, I saw that you had put in the chat earlier with regard to onboarding. Dana said, anytime he hires a new teacher, we walk the campus. I ask them what they see, what's working and not working to get a different perspective before normal sets in. It's been helpful in addressing facilities needs. Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you. And Tamara, I see you have posted, provide new employees with more one-on-one time with me to answer their questions and help them understand our culture. Yeah, I think that's great. Laura talks about enhancing the school culture, focusing on staff and students' needs, promoting student successes, all excellent. Yeah, thank you. So if you didn't post, I'm going to give you a challenge to take out your calendar right now or pull up your calendar and just put a little tickler on November 30th to remind yourself that you are going to be thinking about this again. It's really easy to come to a webinar and listen and then have good ideas, but it's hard to implement new ideas. So I'm going to give you a challenge. Put a tickler on November 30th, people. And at this point, we had 3 objectives for today, exploring the types of changes we're facing, discuss some strategies to create consistency, cohesion, and shared vision, and then consider next steps for implementation. So I think we've had a chance to do all 3 of those. And at this point, I think I have like 1 minute for questions, but I'm going to turn things over to Charisse. And if you wanted to contact me, here's my contact information. So you're welcome to contact me if you have any follow-up questions. And Charisse, I'll turn things back over to you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much, Kathleen. This was really wonderful and provided opportunity to think about things a little bit differently with how we are looking at our culture as we onboard and bring on new people. I really appreciate it because we are all in turbulent times, and this helped to remember how we stay the course. So thank you for this webinar. And I noticed that some of you mentioned that you are new in your role. I think it was 4 of you who mentioned that you were new in your role. And I wanted to make sure that we shared that the CalPro Leadership Institute is currently taking applications for the 2024 class. And so Laura has put the link to the application in the chat. We invite you to apply so that you can continue growing in your new role and learn more about what it means to manage and lead your programs and organizations to success. Thank you again. We offer these admin forum webinars quarterly, and we look forward to you joining us in the next forum. If you have ideas that you would like us to share or include in future forums, please include that on the feedback survey. Laura also put a chat for that or a link for that in the chat. So please be sure and share with us any ideas that you have for future events. And with that, I would say thank you for your time. My time is up, and I really thank you for yours. Have a great rest of the afternoon. See you soon. Bye, everyone.